welcome back to my watercolor channel and to my Christmas special. Today I paint a small scenery, landscape scenery with the Santa Claus and reindeers flying above. I prepared a small sketch because my paper is relatively small. I added the Santa Claus and the reindeers quite strongly there, and I recommend to add it beforehand as well, so it's much easier just to add the color later on. I start with the sky, so basically I wet the top of the paper and then I cover the moon first, so I use some of the deep yellow as well as I have prepared some orange, which is basically made of deep yellow and some cadmium red. But I want to keep the scenery relatively purple, so I mix the purple out of ultramarine blue and some crimson red. And while the paper is still wet, I just add the first layer. So I have here as well some purplish and then adding some of the orange closer to the ground. And then adding some of the blue. However, I'll make sure not to overpaint my house. So it's good to add the color while the paper is still relatively wet. And then more orange onto the ground. And then where the big trees are gonna be standing, rather the purplish colors, blue purplish colors, and a stronger blue here. But I do not cover everything as it is winter, so I let some white bits shine through. And then prepare a little bit of a stronger color, so I just mixed some ultramarine blue with some indigo blue, and it fits nicely together. And mainly I emphasize the edges around the white bits. And then I add some salt again, as I have been doing in this series, onto the top of the paper while the paper is still wet. The idea was to create a little bit of a snowy atmosphere. And then just adding here a little bit there, darker bits, but I wanted to have as well some forest area which is further away. The paper is still wet, so it looks much blurrier. But it creates even here a small distance, more three-dimensional idea. And after the painting has dried, I added some of the orange, so yellow ochre, and a bit of cadmium red to the house because I want to keep it relatively warm. And I also continue with the moon, so I wet it a little bit and then I add some of the orange that I have prepared, but just a very light layer, so it's fitting with the colors of the moon. I try to keep it relatively round, so I leave some lighter areas and then adding some of the orange to create more of the darker areas and that it actually looks like a ball. Then emphasizing a little bit of the house, just adding a light blue And beforehand, I prepared a lot of purple, but out the same colors that I have used before. So some ultramarine blue as well as some crimson red. And it's important to have a lot of paint so you don't run out in the middle. And I create some of the spruces, which are basically in the background of the house, or the house is at the front. And however, the spruces are not very blurry, so I keep them sharp. And I leave as well here in between some of the background color to shine through, because I don't want to overdo it too much. And of course, the spruces are covered in snow. But I continue with the foreground, so some of the snow banks, and adding some lighter patches. Then I add a second tree, and I proceed the same way which I have done before with the first one. So just adding, emphasizing basically the shape of the spruce, adding some darker areas, preparing some more of the dark color, and creating a nice path leading towards the house. Maybe adding here a little bit more structure next to the house, as well as a bit more sharper trees at the back, by using a very thin brush. And I really want to emphasize also more of a darker areas behind the house, and then here's some grass or something else. And then continue with the Santa Claus, which is flying over the moon, and adding a very strong indigo blue onto the drawing or the sketch that I have done before. And then on the reindeers, it's quite good to have the reindeers, even though when they're so small, to have them in different movements, so it looks much more organic and not so boring. But we are nearly done. I prepared more of the brown color, adding some cadmium red to yellow ochre, because I want to shine through some of the windows, and the house has a bit more of a structure, windows and doors. Too much color, just take it off. And then adding a little bit of darker brown by adding some ultramarine blue around the house and the window. And then I still thought it might be good to add some of a darker orange to the moon, or kind of like to emphasize the roundness of the moon. I prepared a light layer and then adding carefully to the moon, but not overpainting the reindeer and the Santa Claus, because they would mix together. But that's it. So thank you for watching, and see you tomorrow. Bye.